City Lights proved to be the hardest and longest undertaking of Chaplin's career. By the time it was completed, he had spent 2 years and 8 months on the work, with almost 180 days of actual shooting. The marvel is that the finished film betrays nothing of this effort and anxiety. As the critic Alistair Cook wrote, "After everything, the film flows as easily as water over pebbles." As usual with Chaplin's projects, the story went through many changes. From the start he decided it would be about blindness. His first idea was that he himself should play a clown who loses his sight but tries to conceal his handicap from his little daughter. From this he moved to the idea of a blind girl who builds up a romanticized image of the little man who falls in love with her and makes great sacrifices to find money for her cure. Once this was decided, he had, unusually, a clear idea of how the film would end. The moment when the blind girl, her sight restored, finally sees the sad reality of her benefactor. Even before he shot it, he had a sense that if it succeeded, this would be one of his finest scenes. And he was right. The critic James A.G. said that it was the greatest piece of acting and the highest moment in movies. Near the end of his life, Chaplin still marvelled at the magic of the scene. "I've had that once or twice," he said, "in City Lights, just the last scene. I'm not acting, almost apologetic, standing outside myself and looking. It's a beautiful scene, beautiful, and because it isn't overacted." He spent many laborious weeks on the deceptively simple scene where the tramp and the flower girl first meet, setting up the premise of the story. Here, in 2 or 3 minutes, through action alone, he establishes the meeting of the two people, the tramp's recognition that she is blind, and his instant fascination and pity, and the girl's misconception that this poor creature is in fact a rich man. At the end of the sequence, having built up the sentiment to a high pitch, he brilliantly dashes it with a touch of broad comedy. "It is completely dancing," said Chaplin in his old age. "It took a long time. We took this day after day." To play the blind girl, he had chosen a 20-year-old Chicago socialite and recent divorcee, Virginia Cherrill. Inexperience was never a disadvantage in Chaplin's eyes. He just wanted his actors to follow his instructions. He liked her ability to give the impression of blindness. To achieve it, he advised her, in his own words, to look inwardly and not to see me. Their collaboration was not easy. Virginia was the only actress with whom Chaplin failed to establish personal sympathy. More than 50 years later, Miss Cherrill declared, "Charlie never liked me, and I never liked Charlie." For his part, he felt she lacked the necessary dedication to the job. "She was an amateur," he said scornfully. On one occasion, he even tried to replace her with Georgia Hale, who had been his leading lady in the Gold Rush. Yet despite, or perhaps because of the struggles, the performance he finally won from her is as near as may be perfect. However severe Chaplin was with others, he was always even harder on himself. In this case, he had the strength of will to cut out a scene which he knew was brilliant, but which simply did not fit into the finished film. It is a polished set of variations built about the simplest idea. The tramp simply spies a piece of wood stuck in a grating and idly tries to free it. No more, and yet the tramp's concentration and the curiosity he arouses in passers-by was transformed into a sequence of high comedy. Even before he began City Lights, the sound film was firmly established. This new revolution was a bigger challenge to Chaplin than to other silent stars. His tramp character was universal. His mime was understood in every part of the world. But if the tramp now began to speak in English, that worldwide audience would instantly shrink. Moreover, there was the problem of how he should talk. Everyone across the world had formed his or her own fantasy of the tramp's voice. How could Chaplin now impose a single, monolingual voice for him? Chaplin boldly solved the problem by ignoring speech and making City Lights in the way he had always worked before, as a silent film. His only concessions were to add a synchronized musical score and to introduce 1 or 2 sound effects, like the disconcerting chirruping of a whistle that he swallowed, which showed that he could use sound as creatively as images for comedy purposes. Already with his silent features, he had paid great attention to the music played by live orchestra for the first runs of his feature films. Now he astounded the press and the public by composing the entire score for City Lights. The premieres were among the most brilliant the cinema had ever seen. In Los Angeles, Chaplin's guest was Albert Einstein, while in London Bernard Shaw sat beside him. City Lights was a critical triumph. All Chaplin's struggles and anxieties, it seemed, were compensated by the film which still appears as the zenith of his achievement and reputation.
The Chaplin Mystery. Jekyll or Hyde, millionaire or vagrant, an outsider resembling no one, yet so close to us all. Cheeky Chaplin, lovable Chaplin. Chaplin the tramp, at once actor, wizard, and acrobat. Chaplin the complete auteur, producer, writer, director, and star of a unique comic universe. More than any other artist in the history of the movies, Chaplin was, for half a century, the master puppeteer of his own marionette. In 1928, Charlie Chaplin embarked on the adventure of City Lights. It was a time when the great cities grew increasingly heartless. Wall Street raced out of control, leaving the nation's poor by the wayside, while in Europe, Fritz Lang's Metropolis had given birth to a politically and socially engaged cinema. In City Lights, Chaplin sought to preserve his style by telling a simple story of love and hope between two lost souls in the big city. Chaplin would again be the tramp, and the young blind woman, for whom he cast a newcomer named Virginia Cheryl, would play a humble flower girl. A unique, universal film figure, Chaplin was also a great pantomime artist, a master of movement. As early as 1916, as in this now forgotten cartoon series, he inspired the great names in film animation. In time, he would be seen in the company of Felix the Cat, Pat Sullivan, and even in this strange balloon land dreamed up by the father of Mickey Mouse. The character of the tramp, which he tried and tested in the school of the British Music Hall as a member of the Fred Carnot Company, went far beyond the cane, the derby hat, and the worn-out shoes. A master of acrobatics and mime, Chaplin put his silhouette through many an absurd and unlikely contortion. Wasn't this exaggeration of gesture also one of the features of cartoon characters? Here he is again in 1980, the subject of an amusing pastiche tinged with a shared nostalgia for the home movie screenings of our grandfathers. Under the direction of Peter Lord, Morph, the small plasticine character, and his friends, enjoy a typical little farce improvised by his favorite character, Charlie. We paid a visit to Peter Lord, who has since gone on to found the Aardman Studios in Bristol, where, with his colleague Nick Park, he produced and co-directed the now classic animation films Chicken Run and Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, mind the table, Gromit!
But first, shh, here are a few images from Charlie Chaplin's last silent movie.
Clearly, Chaplin absolutely profoundly believed in silent filmmaking. Of course, he did, and he did it, you know, better than anyone. He didn't want to change. It's interesting with City Lights. At the start of City Lights, he plays a joke on his audience and on his industry by having some sync sound, apparently, of some people giving speeches. we associate Charlie with being silent, and the tramp with being silent. It's how we understand him, you know, with a piano playing in the background. That's how we understand him. Could he have talked? I don't. I'm glad he didn't. I'm very glad he didn't. I think it would have been positively shocking.
In 1928, Chaplin's greatest challenge had a name: The Jazz Singer, the first talking motion picture in film history whose success exceeded all expectations. When he began shooting in September, Chaplin was fully aware that the public was now demanding only sound pictures. From the moment Al Jolson uttered his first words, silent cinema became an anachronism.
And I want to tell you, this is an all-singing, talking, and dancing picture. A lot of laughs, humor all the way through it.
The very foundations of Hollywood were shaken. The landscape had changed and audiences wanted to hear actors talk. Could the tramp, a product of the British music hall tradition of the 1910s, learn to speak? The public was hopeful, but Chaplin was wary. So he decided. City Lights would contain no talking, but it would be heard. He composed the music and sound effects for the film, and at the film's world premiere on January 30th, 1931, the audience roared its approval.
My background as an animator was in silent material. In fact, in my case, not because I'm 100 years old, but because we were working for a TV program for deaf children. That was the first job I had, and that trained you, like the silent cinema, to communicate without words, without sound effects, and that's a fantastic discipline. Sometimes I think it's a tyranny as well, but somehow in Chaplin's hands it wasn't a tyranny; it was a triumphant thing. What has the human body got to play with? You know, you've got your face, of course, and Chaplin uses that beautifully, but you have particularly the tilt of the shoulders and the tilt of the hips and the weight. I must admit that instinctively I'd like to work with a puppet that was more like Chaplin, that had every joint, you know, because I like a cat that can shrug its shoulders and hunch its shoulders and slump its spine, all these things that chickens can't do.
Sweetie, the chickens are...
I love those things because I think, to me, that's the language of visual communication.
Chaplin was a perfectionist. He knew that the simplest gag required clockwork timing. Here he is, elaborating on his familiar gestures in a typical slapstick scene, the store window. But Chaplin has left us a document about his work methods. Here, in Counterpoint, is the rehearsal footage for this same scene shot a few days earlier.
And I actually am very jealous, very jealous of his way of working, whereby he would have the actors in front of him and could watch them acting the scene time and time again and looking for the perfect way to tell the story.
One of Chaplin's great strengths was his independence. Owning his own studios and being under no obligations to the major Hollywood companies, he was free to choose his materials and decide on his production timetable. As he worked out each scene, he fine-tuned the performances of his actors in the course of interminable rehearsals, sometimes taking months to get a key scene right. The first meeting between the tramp and the flower girl, and the misunderstanding it gives rise to, required more than 300 takes. In this sense, it is typical of his method.
That silent slam that we couldn't hear, because it's a silent film, is the thing that suggests to her that the man walking past is a rich man who's got out of a limousine rather than the tramp. And that misunderstanding runs through the rest of the film now. And now he realises, and now it hits him. It's such a lovely piece of storytelling. It's so clever, and it's so simple. He's got a very nice line, beautiful line, between very gentle, heartfelt, real romance and comedy. It's so unexpected, because he's brought you to a high pitch of a certain sort of emotion, and then does it break it? No, it doesn't. It takes you to the next scene is what it does.